ECSI fans, you want to revolutionize your sports investing habits? Allow me to tell you about WagerWire. WagerWire is an app that helps you become a superior bettor by allowing you to sync all your sports books and track all your bets in one place. See your current action, your betting history, and stats. You could also sign up for sports books and collect bonus offers. Follow them at WagerWire on X, as it's the best account on the platform. Head to App Store or Play Store now and search WagerWire and download the
From the ECSI Sports Studios and the #1 sports investors in America, we bring you
Good afternoon, sports fans from all around the globe. I am the host, Jeff Dawson, East Coast Sports Investors, and it's that time to bring back good friend and colleague, Mr. Ron Momilevsky. Man, was he missed. We were talking backstage, and I says, I could talk hours just about September trying to catch up here. We've missed a lot, but we're so glad to have him back. Talk some NCAA and some NFL. And guys, we're talking backstage. This is where you want to be. This is the truth. This is really what's going on there, not the 10-legged, same game parlay and blah, 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 blah. Guys, come on back. We're back. So Ron's in his customary 4:30 Eastern, 1:30 Pacific time on Thursdays to talk NCAA and NFL. First and foremost, a shout out to our proud sponsors and partnerships. It's WagerWire. Head on over to Google Play, download the app. It is free. And of course, AtlantaSteaksandSeafood.com. Terry Smith's got it all. Make sure you head on over there. Steaks, seafood, chops, appetizers, wines. He's got it all. 4 subscription plans. Just set it and forget it. Every 30 days, have a box of meat sent to you. The only thing you'll need is a spare propane tank. So without further ado, let's bring him on. Welcome back, Mr. Ron Momilevsky. What's up, Ron?
Hi, Jeff, and it's very good to be back with you. I miss talking about NCAA. I get a little bit of other shows where we could talk NFL, but I don't get enough chance to talk NCAA, and there's always something brewing around the nation. Just good to talk fundamental football, X's and O's. I'm here. Whatever's on anybody's mind, I'm ready to talk football.
Well, we were eating an amazing dinner at the South Point this summer, and you and I were talking for the fall. We knew there might be a little delay in us getting our schedules together. We're blessed to have you back. A lot has transpired since our last conversation. So I want to start here. Let's go back to July. Let's go back to August. The rumblings of Penn State, the rumblings of Clemson, the rumblings of Texas. Those were the big three. Ohio State, the defending champs, of course. And then we had the SEC and the darlings of what people thought could be making it to the playoffs, and of course the Final Four and then the championship game. What happened to Penn State? What happened to Texas? And what happened to Clemson? Clemson blew themselves out before they got to the end of September. Penn State started 3-0, and they lose 3 in a row. Franklin has left the building. Insert Matt Rule, which would be a big mistake. We'll get to that one. And now we're talking Texas that saved their season, 3-2, big win, 4-2. They're not dead yet, but from August to today, what the hell happened, Ron?
Well, I guess it's the more we think we know, the more we don't know, because everybody had Penn State as an automatic top 12 qualifier. Clemson was going to rule the day. I mean, they were a year ahead of schedule. This was supposed to be their year, and Texas, all the hype around that program, and they had the solid defense, they had the running game, and so on and so forth. And obviously, all three are disappointing. with the exception of Ohio State, we're looking at a bunch of really good teams, but no great teams. It's funny because Ohio State brought back a whole bunch of defensive players last year. They almost, if there wasn't a 12-team playoff, they wouldn't have even been in the playoff. They needed, all the help they could do under the new format. So it could have been Ryan Day under the chopping block under the old format. Now you have Penn State, who brought back their 2 running backs because of all the money you can spend now in college football. And they brought back a couple of defensive players, Drew Allers there. They bring in a coordinator from Ohio State, Knowles, and it didn't work. And it's pretty surprising to me. Not that they lost at home to Oregon. That was going to be a toss-up game. Not that they wouldn't have trouble against UCLA, but the fact that they outright lost was crazy. And then to lose again to Northwestern, I don't have the answers in that one. Clemson, I could possibly say, well, they dipped their toes into the free agency nil market, but they still haven't embraced it like all these other teams. Texas Tech bought themselves a team. For example, a lot of teams have 50, 60 new players, both at the group of, the top 4 conferences and at the group of 5 conferences. Whereas Clemson grew their own, and that was good enough for years and years, but it wasn't this year. They didn't get the run game going. There was just something missing. I think Dabo Swinney gets a little bit conservative when the game has told you to get more aggressive on 4th down and other situations. And the Texas thing with the amazing, I think, what's the right word for it? It's just, there's so many good teams in the SEC. It's a struggle every week to just stay above water. And Texas had a lot of graduation losses. They were heaping a lot of pressure on Arch Manning in this day and age of social media to get it right. They lost a couple of running backs due to injury, but they've underperformed as well. There's no one right answer there other than a little bit of parity among the top teams in NCAA football, and the fact that chemistry takes time. When you're changing the roster so much, chemistry takes time.
In what transpired last weekend, hats off to Signetti, hats off to the Hoosiers, 7.5 point underdogs. Not only, listen, everyone didn't want to put them in this spot here. Hey, just be competitive, stay in your lane, let the Ducks do their Nike thing and just move on and hope to, win out and maybe lose one more game and get to a nice bowl game and everyone's happy with it. They go in, dominate the first half, and yet a pick 6 brings the Ducks back in. They're like, we got this. 10-point wins, 10-point win in Oregon, Ron. The Hoosiers are here. Are you drinking the Kool-Aid?
Well, I have to now. In this day and age, I thought I'd have a little bit of trouble moving up and down power ratings according to my 30-plus year formula, really more than that, because there's so many changes in rosters that I can miss something real quick. But I think with Indiana, it was just, for me, and I didn't play the Indiana-Oregon game at all, but for me, I didn't have Indiana's power rating high enough to play them because I was just a drop skeptical in Mendoza, the quarterback, that they would actually get better than what they got out of quarterback play last year. So my opening power number was strong with Indiana, especially with that kind of coach. Oh my goodness. But it wasn't off the wall. Indiana's going to be back in the top 10 or anything like that. I think it's just a case for Indiana is that they're just, whatever number you set on them, they're just better than that. And you just have to allow the fact that coaching matters, especially with roster changes. And Signetti knows talent. And boy, he got his team to play a dynamite game in Eugene, Oregon.
Ohio State led by Matt Patricia on the defensive side. It was kind of funny. Last year was Chip Kelly on the offensive side. Now it's Matt Patricia on the defense. think most people say the best defense in the country. Texas is right there. We know that as well. A couple other defenses. But pound for pound, both sides of the ball, I would say right now, if you rolled the ball, actually, I'll get it right from you. Neutral field, your power rankings. I'm going to guess a number here. I'm going to say, I got my number right here. Neutral field, Ohio State and Miami. What's your power ranking number there?
Oh, God. 10.
10.
Yeah,
Wow.
most people would have it a little bit closer because they have Miami closer. But Ohio State is 5.5 points better than any other team right now in the NCAA. And I have cluster Miami's right there with a whole bunch of teams in the 90 to 92, and I have Ohio State on 100.5 using my scale. Here's another one. I can't tell you, Jeff, how great a season this has been for me in NCAA football. And we're talking about another team, Ohio State, that I undervalued. I have a season win ticket against them, which is probably going to lose because I apparently underestimated Matt Patricia because I thought there would be a drop and I evaluated them as such. They still had a very high power rating, but I didn't expect this whatsoever. I mean, they're basically allowing a handful of points per game. And it's impressive. And like I said, I have them 5.5 points ahead of everybody else in the NCAA right now.
Geez, I thought you'd come out with a 3.5, 4.5. Holy moly.
Yeah, I just shocked you, didn't I? Well, part of it is Miami has this thing in November that they kind of regress because the coaching gets them in trouble. But the bottom line is, and I should look it up, this is possibly one of the advantages to not showing my face on screen right now, is that I could just sit here and look it up. Miami has improved 3.5 power rating points this year. So I didn't have them at a particularly outstanding number, but I had them probably second best in the ACC. So now they're right there, pretty much at the top of the ACC. But I still have a 10-point difference.
I'm thinking out loud here, and I'm looking at the makeup, and I'm saying who could match up on both sides. Miami, the Georgia transfers had a great year over there. But again, you talked about coaching, and I think of you every time about special teams when it comes to special teams. And we know the coaching blunders coming. It's not if, it's when down there in Miami. But kind of having flashbacks on the defensive side and on the offensive line side of the glory days, the Ed Reeds, the Warren Sapp days. And so there's still time for them to hiccup. So we'll sit and we'll wait for that hiccup to come. SEC run, I'm infatuated with the Simpson kid in Alabama. I think he has done wonders. He can throw the bleep out of the ball. They got the second best wide receiver in the country. Their defense isn't Saban-esque, but they're checking all the boxes here. Thoughts on the Crimson Tide?
Well, offensively, they're pretty tough to stop. They have some running back injuries right now, and if they can clear that and get run past balance, it's going to look really good because they got Ryan Grubb back. They were together at the University of Washington. Then Grubb stayed in Seattle with the Seahawks. And now after leaving that post, or actually being fired from the Seattle Seahawks, he comes back and he joins DeBoer in Alabama, and it's showing up offensively. Teams can run on Alabama. Now, Missouri ran, but they didn't run enough on Alabama. They didn't trust the process to keep running on Alabama. That's probably their weak link there. But the coaching staff is going to try to outscore a lot of teams. They probably caught a break in that, that Alabama-Georgia game was a little strange in terms of how it ended and the missed opportunities in that game. But I do have Alabama pretty much, right at the top of the SEC. It's kind of cluttered. I mean, the SEC, you take a team like Florida, they're a really, really good team, but the kind of schedule that they have to go through, it's just really tough. Missouri held up well after playing pretty much cupcakes for 5 weeks, and now they're finally going on the road. But you have so many other good teams. You have to have a coach that gets your team up every single week. We'll see if Alabama can do that past this Tennessee home game. But there's no question I'm impressed with Alabama and Ty Simpson, just like you are.
Notre Dame last year wins at A&M and then loses as a 28-point favorite against UNI, Northern Illinois. Then Sheets makes it to the championship game. This year they have a couple hiccups, but they've now stepped on the gas. Big game. I think their last challenge against a USC team who has a great quarterback, defensively has problems here. Kind of shocked. They're showing 8.5. They're lying. That number was actually 10.5 in some spots before it got out to the public. Is dipped to 8.5 now, 9.5 with a 61. If I said to you, Ron, Notre Dame puts up 40 against USC, you're going to call me what?
I'm going to say that that's not necessarily probable, but it wouldn't be unexpected. When you were talking before about, balanced teams, who could be as balanced as Ohio State, Notre Dame is the one balanced team that comes to mind because you knew they lost a lot of players at the end of last year, and they're growing week by week. You look at this Notre Dame team, they have two extremely capable running backs. They are underrated at wide receiver. Their young quarterback has delivered. Their defense has withstood roster losses to the point that they're starting to get into the top tier defensively. USC will be a massive test because Lincoln Riley's offense is really rolling. But on the other hand, I think USC could be exposed by Love and the other running back because I think they can create space with their running backs and then maybe hit a big play down the road. I mean, Notre Dame, I think, is that one team that could ascend to be that second highest power rated team. Right now, they're right there. I have them about 6 points behind Ohio State. And I think I think Notre Dame is improving week by week.
I'm having those issues with my headphones. I apologize again here. Couple big games on the slate, Ron, before we transition to the NFL. We talked about USC, Notre Dame, Texas, and not a bounce back, but a letdown spot, 12.5 at Kentucky. Penn State now 3-point underdogs at Iowa. A&M 7.5 at Arkansas. I've been waiting for A&M for a hiccup. That hasn't happened yet. Mississippi and Georgia kind of intrigues me in regards to opened at 6.5. It's gone through the 7 number, now 7.5 there. I'll stop there. Surprised at that number that big, Ron?
I said it at 7.5, so I'm not surprised. I think I'm going to say this again. I've said it all season from preseason on. I think Mississippi's team would be a touchdown underdog to Mississippi's team last year. That defense, especially against the run, was lights out last year. You couldn't run on Mississippi if you tried, and now it's back to below average figures. I think they're having some hiccups at wide receiver because they lost a ton of wide receiver talent. What I will say is that Ole Miss's schedule pacing this year, if they had the schedule pacing they had this year, last year, they would have been 11-1. But this is the year they have a nicely fit schedule. Now, Georgia has revenge from last year in this game, and that's why I agree with the power ratings that they should be set over 7. And even though Georgia is probably a little bit worse than last year, I think Mississippi's defense just isn't there right now. And we'll see if Georgia takes advantage of it by wearing them down in the run game. Would I be shocked if Mississippi kept it closer wins? Not necessarily, because we've seen Georgia squeak by how many times now? I mean, they were quite lucky and fortunate against Auburn last week. So they're not hitting on all cylinders. But I still think Mississippi has a couple weaknesses. And maybe they were exposed even in that trap game against Washington State last week. They still didn't expect it. I mean, they were favored by 32 and won by 3. And it was in danger for a while.
Um, a couple numbers strange. Washington, Michigan. Michigan on a bounce back spot, only 5.5 against this Washington team that started off great. Now they're on the road a few times here. You expect a bounce back from Michigan, I would assume there. And the one I can't wrap my head around, is it disrespect on the LSU side as a 2.5 point underdog in Vanderbilt? Or are we going to ride the Diego train? And what am I missing here with Vanderbilt 2.5 over LSU?
Yeah, you can't see me nodding my head when you mention Vanderbilt and LSU. I didn't know I would still be handicapping college football and Vanderbilt would ever be a favorite against LSU. So it's crazy. My power numbers would make this LSU by 2. So, I mean, what Vanderbilt is doing this year with the power number that I've never had for, even in the Jay Cutler days, I never had a power rating this high for Vanderbilt. So it's legit. They're a legit team. But according to my numbers, I'm supposed to play Vandy. I'm supposed to play LSU in this game because I have more than 3.5 points value. I don't know if I'll do it because Vandy's look so good. They're rested. They've had a week off. That Pavia, he just gets things done. He's so important to that team. But then again, LSU has a coordinator that I really like as well. I mean, I'm only looking LSU at this game, but maybe my numbers already quite high on Vandy, and I double checked it with 3 or 4 other people. I put out an online thing, and we were all in the same vicinity. We were all almost exact on Vandy. So I don't know that my number's wrong. I just think that Vandy is one of those teams that's special.
I think so too. When I'm usually wrong, I'm wrong, and I can read the market with the best of them, and this number's got me intrigued. Before we go to NFL, some notes from you: the widening gap between the Big Four conferences and the Group of Five, and the firing of head coaches has never seen. Would you say it has never been easier? And take Penn State. I guess Adidas is now involved. 49 million reasons to be left on the table. That's okay. We'll take care of Mr. Franklin. Don't worry about it. And I talked about it on my show earlier today with Matt Grissom. BC, and as bad as they've looked, their only win against Fordham, they owe O'Brien $5 million next year and then $5 million the year after. And BC doesn't fire coaches and leave money like that on the table. They got waxed by Clemson last week. They're 2-point favorites over UConn this week. Week off, then 3 straight home games run. Notre Dame, loss. SMU, loss. And their last home game of the year on the 15th of November, Georgia Tech, loss. So I can't wait to hear you and the firing of the coaches and just writing checks.
Yeah. Well, it's easy to write checks nowadays because buyouts are nothing. They're printing money. I hate this for college professors and other people who service these universities. They're watching all the money being driven by network TV, contracts, special money being given to the players. And I understand it's a new day and age, pay the players. But what are you doing for women's sports? What are you doing for the non-traditional sports? Any ACC or I'm not ACC, but Big Ten or SEC school, they can afford $40 million in buyout. It's just crazy. They don't care. They don't even care if the players opt out because they could buy new ones from other teams at the Group of Five level, for example. So I'm going to run down the 5 teams that have fired coaches in the getting feedback there, but in the group in the top level. So Arkansas has fired their coach. They need to make a splash higher in the competitive SEC and get 2 solid coordinators. UCLA acknowledged their mistake and moved on. If they were still in the Pac-12, they would not have fired their coach. But now that they're in the Big Ten, they could fire their coach because they're getting all this extra money. Worst scenario is if they promoted their own interim. We've seen how interim coaches end up, and then eventually it's not the right hire. Penn State, I wonder about Penn State. In the old days when they weren't part of the Big Ten and they were, humming along with Joe Paterno on the East Coast, they had a pipeline to being really, really good. But now they're in the Big Ten and they have Oregon in there and Washington in there and USC in there and so on. They could slip back in the pack. This is going to be one of the most important hires ever for a university, whatever Penn State does. Virginia Tech, 5-6 going into Virginia 4 straight years wasn't good enough. Very important time for Virginia Tech in a conference where you can move up. And how about Oklahoma State? Gundy was winning, but once he wasn't winning, they weren't too thrilled with him. They almost had a player mutiny a couple years ago. So they need a coach. This is a tough one for Oklahoma State, Jeff, because they need a coach who could hold their own recruiting against now SEC power Oklahoma. How do you do that? They need a coach and a recruiter there. And you better believe that the next ones to go are going to be Florida, Wisconsin, and maybe even Baylor. It's just crazy firing head coaches.
What about the gap between the Big Four and the Group of Five?
So I was laughing when I was looking at Western Kentucky losing by 19 to Florida International and losing at home. Had to lower my power rating. The power rating in Conference USA, the best team in Conference USA, their power rating is probably 10 points below what the best team in Conference USA was last year. The gap is just crazy. These teams have to reinvent their roster every year. Every star player is going. We're not even talking about the average team in Conference USA or the average team in the Mountain West or the average team, the FAUs in the American. We're talking about the top teams, and they're all getting crushed by, Memphis beat Arkansas. Okay, USF lost to Miami. Boise got crushed by USF and Notre Dame. James Madison lost by double digits to Louisville. Toledo is my number 1 MAC-rated team, and they've already lost in the MAC twice as double-digit favorites, which is partly a coaching issue, but it's also the fact that there are just no great teams anymore. And there are a few teams that you could say would even be acceptable in terms of group of 5, group of 6 teams. Tulane, Memphis, which hasn't been tested that much. Maybe USF, even though they lost to Miami of Florida. This gap is it's a great divide. And at some point they just have to acknowledge it and maybe have 2 conferences, 2 different divisions. It's just bad. Group of 5. It's bad football sometimes when you watch these midweek games.
NFL. Again, we're already 30 minutes in and we're just getting to the NFL run. And I know I didn't have the Ravens 1-5 on my bingo card. But the funny thing is, Lamar will be back after the bye week. And they're chasing a 4-1 Pittsburgh team. They could lose tonight to Cincinnati. Yeah, I said that out there, guys. They could lose. I'm not buying the Rodgers Kool-Aid. If they get a better defensive showing, the Bengals and Browns are dead. Okay, they are. And I still think the Ravens got a 9-2 run in them to maybe push for the division, if not the division, probably sneak in the back door to the playoffs. The AFC East. The Jets are dead. The Dolphins are dead. The Bills have lost 2 in a row and leaking oil. OMG, the Patriots are in first place there. Our friend Dan Rivera, hats off to your Colts. An amazing start to the year. I think the Chargers get you on Sunday, but that's for another show there. But again, Houston, maybe. But their division, Jacksonville, maybe. We'll see about that. And in the West, I saw enough. Here comes Kansas City. Great win against Detroit last week. And, Rashee Rice is now coming back. So let's start in the AFC and your thoughts on what you thought in August to where we are here in October.
Yeah, so in retrospect, New England had all systems go because they had a top 3 draft, they had the top free agency market, they had the 4th place schedule, and they had a coaching upgrade. There are cracks in the armor with New England with an offensive line that's allowed too many sacks. Uh, we know Mike Vrabel does a great job stopping the run, but they're still vulnerable against the pass. I think New England is a viable playoff team. My thought in August was that they were a fringe on just on the outside looking into the playoffs. So I would argue that they have ascended from there. When you look at Pittsburgh's division, my assessment was even with Joe Burrow, I just didn't like Cincinnati's defense. I thought they could win 9 or 10 games, but Baltimore and Buffalo were my top 2 teams coming if you talk to me in August. Now, we had a million injuries in Baltimore, but I still have problems with how John Harbaugh manages late game and late half situations, and it reared its ugly head twice already this year. But my assessment in August would have been that Baltimore is the number 1 team, and I still think, like you said, that they're not out of the playoff picture yet. I think they could still come back. There are some issues in Pittsburgh still, so I agree with you. Houston would have been by default my top team in the South. What Indy's doing, Russell, is magnificent because I got to tell you, Daniel Jones is a different quarterback. What happened to his internal clock? It's like it's been fixed completely. I did not see that coming. I did expect in August that their pass defense would be better because they changed coordinators. So I'm on board with that. I still think Houston could give Indy some trouble, but I do think Indy is the top team. I had Jacksonville as a 7-win team in August. I have them higher now, but I don't think they're the 10.5 win team that they were posted at last week. I think they will come back to the pack. In the West, I agree with you. Kansas City is ascending. Mahomes is throwing downfield more. The Chargers, unfortunately, were hit by injuries to the most important positions you could have, left tackle and right tackle. And they were banged up. They've lost a pass rusher, and they've lost both of their top running backs that were going to pave the way for run-pass balance for Justin Herbert. Very unfortunate because I think they're right there. But I would give Kansas City the edge in the division right now. Everything else is pretty much on par in the AFC.
NFC, the defending champs, leaking oil. They kind of muscled through a 4-0 start. Have lost 2 in a row. AJ Brown back to his shenanigans again. I don't know. Pittsburgh is kind of waving the flag and saying, "Hey, we're looking for a wide receiver." I know Mike Vrabel would be interested. Stephon Diggs, healthy, has kind of emerged. Drake May has looked like Tom Brady for all I know. But in the NFC, Eagles coming back to the pack. Detroit, tough spot as they host the Road Warriors, and Baker Mayfield 3-0 on the road. All 3 walk-offs at Atlanta, at Houston, and then Seattle. And here they are now. Looks like the front 3 might be out. Adding Ibuka to Evans to Godwin. No problem. We'll add this Johnson, that Johnson, and who knows, maybe Billy White Shoes Johnson for all I know. And I have really grown up to all of a sudden respect what Baker's done there. The Niners banged up. Puka could be gone for a little while for the Rams. It's a mash unit everywhere. Thoughts on the NFC pre-August and where we are now today, Ron?
So pre-August, I expected a little bit of drop-off from Washington because of the elevated schedule, tape on Daniels for the second year, and still a good roster, but not necessarily a great roster. I expected all the challenges, and we're going to see them. I think Washington is maybe 55-45 to make the playoffs, so that hasn't changed. I expected Philly to win 11 games, not over 11 and a half, even 10 games. I expected a little bit of drop from Philly, and we should have seen it. they got lucky. I mean, they really have the stat sheet of a 2-4 team. I think they're lucky to be 4-2, and so they may beat my assessment because I do think that I still have them winning the East, and I still have them winning the East from August and to now. In the Lions division, I thought Green Bay would give them a lot of trouble, especially week one. They were more than prepared week one. I enjoyed that game immensely. But since then, I think the Eagles have found their footing. And even though they lost to Kansas City, I would say 51-49 Detroit over Green Bay. But I don't think we've seen the best of Green Bay yet. And if we haven't seen the best of Green Bay, then Green Bay's in a little trouble. Didn't know what quite to make of Minnesota before the season or now, kind of put them at 9. In the South, yeah, I had Tampa Bay winning almost by default because of who's there. What Baker's doing is absolutely amazing, but they just have too many injuries to say that they're going to be anything more than a 3 or 4 seed. Maybe they achieve more than that. They have consistency in coaching. That helps. It helps in Minnesota. It helps in Tampa. No really change in assessment. I'm starting to learn about Seattle. I really don't know what to think about Seattle. And now I'm kind of buying into Seattle. I think it's a 2-team race. What I thought about San Francisco before the season is the schedule was just so easy that they were a massive contender in the division. I think the loss of their linebacker, Fred Warner, is going to be tough to overcome. They still have a path to 10 wins because it's a really easy schedule. But my goodness, they've lost way too many important players on that team. So I expect them to play down to the level of competition. So I guess the major changes I have from August to now is that I respect what Seattle is doing. And I'd probably say that I'm a little bit higher on Detroit than I was to start the season.
Before we get to a couple observations that you've had over the first 6 weeks here, it's kind of funny where, I'm a very big high stakes fantasy football player, and back in the day you'd run to the window and get Justin Tucker and set it and forget it because he was special. The last couple of years, Aubrey from Dallas, he was special. But there's a tweet out there that the field goal kickers are at about a 70+% rate from 50 and beyond. And these guys are lining up from 60, 62, 63 with their eyes closed. The Jacksonville kicker made a 70-yarder in preseason. What the hell's going on with these K balls? And you see the I call them the Charlie Brown balls every once in a while, where they roll out the rugby balls, Ron, and when they miss like Charlie Brown.
You're right. Those balls make a difference, and they used to give them to them. What was it? 90 minutes before the game, and now they give it. Now they have a whole stack for the whole season. 70 or 80 balls that they give to each team, and that's probably making somewhat of a difference. The other, the kickers are better. Athletes are generally better. They run faster 40s. They do this, they do that. So it's also proven true with the mechanics and with the training and everything in the kicking game. And you're getting more of these kicks nowadays because 1 first down and you're in field goal range because of something I'll talk about with special teams. So there's no question that that's important, but we're also seeing more kicks blocked. And part of the reason that you're seeing more kicks blocked is that longer kicks are still more susceptible to having kicks being blocked.
The laugh, yeah. Profit margin. Kickers are taking the K balls home and inflating them with helium. And back in the day, the Patriots were taking air out of the balls. So it's
that's a fun one.
We'll save Deflategate for a while there. But your observations, you talked about special team play is now more important than ever. The 4 phases to discuss, Ron.
Yeah, so you have to pay attention to special teams if you're a team, if you're a coach, or you're just flat out stupid. There's no other way to put it. In the past, it was only outliers. I used to tell people when I made my special teams ratings, throw out the middle 24 or something like that. Just look at the top four and the bottom four. The rest, it's too clustered. It doesn't make a difference. Green Bay and the Chargers, they wasted entire seasons because they were routinely the worst special teams units in the NFL. Chargers fixed that with a new special team coach, and then they got Harbaugh in place to just amplify that. Green Bay hasn't really fixed it much, so they're still ambling along. Here's the four areas. Kickoffs. You miss the landing zone, the ball's at the 40. You kick it in the end zone, the ball's at the 35. You don't spin the ball, you get a long kick return. Speaking of returns, everybody's stationary during the kickoff, so long gainers are probable. Now you have, instead of 1 out of 5 kicks being returned, you have 3 out of 4 kicks, or 75% of the kicks being returned. You better draft a return specialist with a little bit of wiggle, and that's going to make a difference. Field goals. You talked about the massive number of 50-yard field goals. Also, bad drafting teams tend to have less special team talent because they don't have enough bodies to go around. They squander picks. They're doing this and that and whatever. So they're not fielding great teams in special teams. And then finally, you're seeing more athletic players block kicks and defend against long kick returns and even long punt returns. You need more athleticism on defense. That, to me, makes special teams play, which was devalued for such a long time. Oh, we can just get a kicker and pay him minimum wage kind of stuff. It's more than just that. You must pay attention to special teams.
Looking over some notes here. How about a QB quiz and a QB observation?
Okay. I'm putting you on the spot. Name the last mediocre quarterback to win the Super Bowl.
Well, the last I got a couple that pop in my head. One played for the Ravens and one played for the Giants.
Okay. Well, I would go back to 2017 and say Nick Foles was a mediocre quarterback. He won the Super Bowl with them. But the next one I would have was probably Brad Johnson in 2022. Those are the two that came to mind for me.
Okay.
Tampa Bay. How about the last mediocre quarterback or quarterbacks just to make the Super Bowl? They were on losing teams. Russell says Russ Wilson, but he was considered a top 7 or 8 quarterback at the time that he was in the Super Bowl.
I mean, I'll go way back, Ron. The year that Peyton won it with Denver, he couldn't throw the ball over 15 yards without a hook and lateral. But that was Peyton Manning. We knew that.
Trent Dilfer is a correct observation.
Yes, Dilfer. And the Giants there, I'm not talking Eli there. They won it way back. Was it not Sims? Hostetler? Hostetler was one.
Yeah, you're going way back, but yeah. But look at how far back we have to go. I could argue that Jimmy G was a good quarterback, but maybe more, he was not a top 10 or 12 quarterback when he went to the Super Bowl in 2019. We could argue that Colin Kaepernick misused on the last series of downs, or he would have been a quarterback winner. But we can argue he was probably not a top 8 or 10 quarterback. And Rex Grossman in 2026 was certainly not, certainly fits the bill. But if you're talking 5 quarterbacks out of 38 quarterbacks, 19 times 2, all I'm saying is rules changes favor quarterbacks so much. When you're a fan of a team or when you're looking at the draft, if you keep drafting mediocre quarterbacks, you have a ceiling. You cannot get to the Super Bowl. Not with the rules favoring offenses, and you can't touch anybody on defense, and accuracy matters and all that. It's just an observation from me that nowadays, if you don't have a top 10 or 12 quarterback, you're not getting into the Super Bowl.
Before I give you that button hook here for your final thoughts, GMs you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, that would be the button hook thing. That's the GM thing right there. I think we place a lot of blame on head coaches, and I understand that Aaron Glenn hasn't got it right, and he needs help. He needs a coordinator. He needs a bye week. He needs whatever to reset. Even Brad Johnson wasn't getting it right until we had the bye week. We just fired a coach at Tennessee where he was given 21 games or something to produce and he couldn't produce. There's a lot of bad coaches out there, so I understand that. But behind every bad coach is a bad GM, and maybe we should place more of the blame on the GMs, in my opinion. Look at the Miami Dolphins, and I'm not making excuses for their head coach, but from 2022 to 2024, those 3 drafts that we could properly evaluate, they basically got one person in those drafts total, that's really making any sort of a difference for that team. And it's a running back of all positions, which is not necessarily a needle mover. You can have a great running back and not win a bunch of games. You need other parts to be good. So Miami's GM, who's been there for 20 years, is solidly to blame. You look at Cincinnati, 2 straight bottom 4 drafts, and you have a situation where Joe Burrow has no help on the offensive line and the defense isn't very good. Very reminiscent of Peyton Manning's days in Indianapolis. Atlanta and New Orleans have made 45 consecutive trades up the board and 0 down the board. How do you build roster continuity? Atlanta didn't address the pass rush until the 2025 draft, finally addressing the pass rush. Meanwhile, we're firing coaches instead of firing GMs. When Atlanta, to blame Atlanta is not just a head coach thing, it's a GM thing. And it's definitely a GM thing in New Orleans to blame that. And then, tying it back to special teams, if you're not drafting enough players, you're not funding your special teams unit enough. I'm just saying that in my buttonhook here, once again, when you look at the 2026 draft, keep in mind what the GMs are doing and whether or not they have a master plan. Because if they're trading inconsistently, wildly, without purpose, or getting that one player that they have to have, in my opinion, Jeff, they're missing the boat.
And it's funny because a good friend of mine sent a tweet back from last week in the top 10 picks as it stands right now in the draft. And he's like, who are these guys? He goes, it doesn't match what they said in June and July. So I'm going to piggyback, Ron, because this is not brought up locally here, and I think it should. Gerard Mayo, no one's heard a peep from him. He must have got paid some great hush money. And we're seeing the emergence of Drake May, the quarterback that everyone thought he was. And I'm a big Vrabel fan. They brought in Wolf from Green Bay, the son, the next coming. And they, Kraft strategically had some pawns in the upstairs to make sure everything is done correctly. Or they run back to the Krafts and they say, this is what's going on. Can we finally say that we were robbed a year? Why wasn't Vrabel, other than that handshake that was said, Mayo, you're our next coach once Bill leaves, and we saw the poop storm that he brought on with the coaches that didn't, your offensive coordinator has never been an offensive coordinator, your defensive coordinator has never done this, and you're seeing in front of us now the easiest schedule since 1970s in front of them. They won't be a dog, by the way, Ron, until they go to Tampa Bay. And there'll be a short dog there in Tampa other than when the Bills come back into town because of the injuries to Cincinnati and a few others. But my question to you, you're talking about the GMs. Look at where the Patriots could have been if he said, hey, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayo, we're not going there. We're going with Vrabel a year early.
Yeah. Now, was Mayo interim before he became head coach? Or did he just become head coach?
He was promised he was the next coming, 4 years in advance or 3 years in advance. Once Bill was ushered out the door, he was going to handshake, wink, wink. You're the next coach.
Okay, I would say glass half full. Maybe it worked out for the best because maybe they wouldn't have had this free agent splash that they made here this year. Maybe they had more cash money or cap money or whatever. Then they were better positioned in the draft because of the bad record to go out and start the draft in such a way that they could replenish the roster. Maybe if you have them Vrabel sooner. They're much better in 2024 than their record indicated, but maybe this roster is better now because they waited a year. So I would just look forward as opposed to looking back.
And their running woes. Listen, Henderson was the pick. He looked great in preseason. He was returning kicks. He was hitting the holes. The Patriots' running game is anemic. You'll need that as the weather gets cold. Is that more on the offensive scheme with McDaniel or the O-line, or is it on Stevenson and Henderson at this point?
It's an interesting concept. I'm glad you mentioned that because I think Henderson in space is where you want him. He's a long gainer waiting to happen. I had said out loud, I think a week or so ago, I wondered why Henderson wasn't being used enough. And I got a couple responses saying that, well, he's not quite ready yet and so on. Well, now that Gibson is gone and on IR, he's now elevated to number 2 or 1A. I think Stevenson has a ceiling, a lower ceiling than Henderson. He could run into walls. He's never been a great yards per carry guy. So they need Henderson to develop. And McDaniels, I think he'll be able to scheme things for him. Maybe they're just taking their time. Some of the rookies need a little bit more time. Maybe the schemes weren't complex, and college schemes are simplified. You just take the ball and run. You just do this and do that. We're at Ohio State. We're better than you anyway. Just take this and whatever. More complicated in the NFL. So I think that in this particular case, I got my phone going. In this particular case, it's the kind of situation where, how can I put it, that he'll get his chance, and when he gets his chance, I think he'll be schemed okay.
And it's funny because at Ohio State, it was Judkins and Henderson. And Henderson was the guy in space, the pass catcher. Judkins is doing what he does right now. And don't forget, when Vrabel became the head coach of the Titans, he had Lord Henry. And it was just, 5 yards in a cloud of dust. No one was going to step in front of Henry for the first couple of years. And so now it's almost like Stevenson is his Henry. And here's Henderson waiting for his time. And as you said, no Gibson, it's time. And I think I'll say this out loud, and I think you're spot on. I think they're almost holding back. He's going to be that second half wild card run.
Yeah, it's a long season. Maybe not for him because Ohio State played a lot of games, but most of the college kids play 12 games. I think just sometimes we rush things with these guys and let them learn the ropes, let them get acclimated to the system. There's still plenty of time, not only this year, but in his whole career to develop.
Well, I can't wait. So glad. And make sure you tell your wife thank you because we're pushing an hour. It's Thursday. So welcome back. Great catch on the button hook. You were missed. I want to give a shout out to, of course, Mr. Russell Saylor, Profit Margin, everyone else watching and listening. But as I always wrap up this segment, Ron, tell everyone where they can find your work and your following, of course, on X and your podcast with Chris.
Yeah, so on Tuesday, we brainstorm, Chris and I, on air. We come up with just different, like last week, we came up with teaching points in terms of how to assess recency with a team as opposed to going back from week 1 to week 7, how we keep track of what's going on, whether we can get ahead of the curve in terms of a team falling or a team rising. So Chris and I have our conversations that we carry on in front of the public and podcast. I've also, in addition to being happy to be back with you, I'm happy to be back with Ted on the Inside Blitz. That show is at noon on Thursday, so you can go back and watch that if you'd like. We cover all things NFL. Every once in a while, I'll appear on Twitter doing some other stuff or as a guest. I've kind of limited that right now, but as I'm returning to health, hopefully I'll be a little bit more active. And then, I'll make some observations before Sunday's games in the NFL week by week. And that's where I'm at.
Well, again, welcome back. Tomorrow, 9 a.m., Scotty Webb will be back to get the final in-pocket plays for NCAA and NFL. Around 10:15, 10:30, I'll be a guest with Andrew McGinnis at McGinnis Picks at Wager Talk to talk some NHL, to talk some Jays baseball, and of course, anything related to the football. 11 a.m. Nick Hathcote will be back, NCAA Insiders Football. And 11:30, Tyler Wyatt will be back at Odds Culture. And Tyler Wyatt Betts was unable to be here today at 11:30 due to someone cut their lines in front of his house, and he had no power at 11:30 or 11 o'clock. So everyone, baseball on 6:08, Milwaukee and the Dodgers, Toronto, Seattle at 8:30, an NFL game, Pittsburgh at Cincinnati, hockey, college football, you name it, we got it. Russell Saylor says, good to see you guys. Have a great weekend. Russell, be ready. I think you're going to lose this weekend, but if you win, God bless you. You got that old line that Mr. Taylor looks phenomenal, almost like that Marshall Faulk you had way, way back in the day. Guys, enjoy yourself and stay tuned.